Did you ever have a difference of opinion with someone? Did that difference of opinion ever lead into an argument? And maybe it even escalated from there. Well, today we're going to be talking about Russia and how a group of peasants had a disagreement with their leaders, which actually led into a full-on revolution. Today we're specifically going to ask ourselves, how did the Russian Revolution change the role of government? So today we're going to learn about the effects of the Russian Revolution. But first, we need to break it down into three parts. First, we need to describe what life was like under the Tsars. And second, we need to describe the causes and the effects of the Russian Revolution. And third, we need to explain how Russia changed under communist rule. But first, there are some words that you should know. Your academic word for this lesson is provisional. And other words that you're going to encounter during this lesson are autocratic, communism, Marxism, Soviet, and single-party state. Let's start out by taking a look at our lesson question. How did the Russian Revolution change the role of government? Now, it's important to remember that when we're talking about revolutions, that we're always thinking about the ideas of cause and effect. How did one thing or one action lead to another? Now, first, we're going to look at life in Russia before the revolution, and then we're going to look how that caused the Russian Revolution and the Civil War, and then finally how that caused the end effect, which was communist rule. So as we go through this lesson, just always think about these ideas of cause and effect. Let's start out by taking a look at this photograph. You can see the Tsar's palace in the background, and down here you see all of these people lined up trying to talk to him. Let's take a look at what life was like in Russia in 1916. Your leader is the Tsar, but you never see him. You and your family are starving, you're hungry, and the stores don't have enough food to feed all of you. Your brother is fighting in a war, but he doesn't have enough bullets for his gun, and you know that he's constantly in danger. And finally, you hear talk about overthrowing the government, and suddenly this doesn't seem like such a bad idea. Let's take another look at our lesson question. How did the Russian Revolution change the role of government? Well, again, remember, especially when we're talking about revolutions, we're always looking at cause and effect. We started to look at this a little bit, some of the causes in our warm-up. And now we're really going to get into what life was like in Russia before the revolution. Let's take a closer look at life in Russia. The important thing to remember about Russia at this time period was that it was under an autocratic monarchy, and that meant that it was ruled completely by the Tsar. He had unlimited power. Also at this time, Russia was under an agricultural economy, and this meant that most of the population were farmers. They were farming the land. And because of this, there was a very low standard of living. Remember, we're always talking about cause and effect. Keep that in mind. There was no middle class, and there was a very small working class, and they lived in St. Petersburg, where all the industry was being kept. There was a large peasant class, and they worked that land for very low wages. And there was a very small, very wealthy, privileged class. However, no one was more wealthy or privileged than the Tsar and his family. Here's Tsar Nicholas and his family right here. Let's take a look at how well they're dressed. They're all wearing crowns, and they're sitting in opulent spaces. Tsar Nicholas II was the last Tsar to rule Russia, and he's sitting right here. He ruled with almost unlimited power. Remember, we talked about unlimited power when we were talking about an autocratic monarchy. However, he was viewed as a very weak leader. He was married to a German princess, Alexandra, right here, and he did allow some democratic reforms in 1905, but later he changed his mind and he took them away. And he was also influenced by a faith healer named Rasputin. Now, a lot of these things all led to his view as being a weak leader. Let's take a look at one incident that occurred that made him seem extremely weak. This was the 1905 revolution incident that is now referred to as Bloody Sunday. Let's take a look at this photo right here. You can see all of these peasants leaving after church, following their minister, going to go talk to the Tsar. Well, in 1905, 200,000 people marched to St. Petersburg to ask for more personal freedoms, better working conditions, and an elected legislature. Their ministers said, let's go talk to the Tsar. He'll be reasonable and he'll help us. But the Tsar actually wasn't even home that day. But you can see who was home, this lineup of soldiers. They saw the peasants coming, and instead of hearing them out, they fired on the crowd, killing about 1,000 people. Now, this incident led to a lot of people seeing the Tsar as weak, and Russians were angry at the Tsar's lack of democratic reforms. Now, another reason that the Tsar was seen as being a weak leader was because he was under the influence of this man. This is Rasputin. The important thing to remember about Rasputin is that he was actually a peasant monk. And he believed that in order to gain God's forgiveness, one must actually sin as much as possible. Rasputin gained almost complete control over the Tsarina, Alexandra. And it was because he claimed to be able to cure her youngest son, Alexei's hemophilia. Now, hemophilia was an incurable disease that he was diagnosed with when he was very little. He governed Russia with the Tsarina while the Tsar was at the front during World War I, but later he was murdered by Russian nobles. Why was he murdered by Russian nobles? Well, first, he was kind of a bad guy, but second, and most important to remember, was that he was a peasant monk. He was killed by nobles who saw that if a peasant could gain influence over another noble, especially one like the Tsar or his wife, that could be seen as a large threat to that small, wealthy, privileged class that we talked about. So Rasputin's influence was another reason that many believed that the Tsar was unfit to rule. So adding to this resentment and all these bad feelings, here comes along World War I, and Russia finds itself at war. Let's take a look at this photo for a moment. You can see these soldiers coming back from the fighting, and you can see that their arms are bandaged up, they're hurt, and you can also take a look at their expressions. They don't look particularly happy. Well, the war was straining an already struggling society. Young men were being drafted to fight, and about 5 million were actually killed or wounded. The cities ran out of food because so many peasant farmers were drafted. Let's talk about that for a second. Peasant farmers. You can remember that earlier I said that Russia was an agricultural economy. This meant that most of the people were farmers. If you take all the farmers away, you're going to run out of food. And because of this, the workers went on strike. Now, all these events, the war, the Bloody Sunday, the influence by Rasputin, all of this, plus now the famine and the loss of loved ones, increased this resentment against the Tsar. Let's take another look at our lesson question up here for a moment. How did the Russian Revolution change the role of government? Well, remember, while we're talking about the Russian Revolution, we're talking about cause and effect. Now, we started to do that a little bit in the first part of this lesson while we were looking at life in Russia before the revolution. Now we're going to talk about how all those unhappy things that we talked about in the beginning led up to the Russian Revolution and the Civil War. Let's talk about the February Revolution. Here's a flowchart that's really going to help us talk more about cause and effect. The February Revolution was the first of two that occurred in 1917. There's a lot of information here, but right now I just want you to focus on these two. Here's a cause: protests. People were protesting food and coal shortages. Coincidentally, most of these protesters happened to be women. Now, that was the cause. Here's the effect. These led to riots. The protests turned violent, and untrained soldiers joined the riots instead of stopping them. What do I mean when I say untrained soldiers? Well, remember that all the professional soldiers were gone fighting the war, so they were replaced by these untrained soldiers who, instead of doing their duty, actually turned and started joining the riots. Now, the effect of all of this was a new kind of government. What happens when you lose control of your army? You don't get to be Tsar anymore, and the Tsar was forced to step down. A provisional government took over, and when I say provisional, I mean a placeholder, something that you do until you can find a permanent solution. But not everyone was happy with this provisional government, and one of the least satisfied people was this man. This is Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, and he opposed the Tsar and the strict class society in Russia. When I say class society, I'm talking about that difference between those very wealthy, privileged classes and the poor people, the farmers. And he was exiled for his opposition to the government. However, after the Tsar stepped down, he returned to Russia after the February Revolution. Let's talk about the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks, this was the name of the political party that Vladimir Lenin formed. Now, the Bolsheviks, in Russian, this actually means the majority. So he named his party the Majority Party. Now, that provisional government that was formed after the Tsar was forced to step down, they proved unable to govern effectively. They made a few social changes that were demanded by the people, but then later they were all taken away. So now let's look at Vladimir Lenin and his Bolshevik party. Vladimir Lenin, here in this picture, you can see him addressing this crowd. He's promising the people peace, land, and bread. And this is what the people wanted. This is what they were asking the Tsar for. So support for his Bolshevik party began to grow. The Bolsheviks were a revolutionary group that supported the ideas of Marxism and communism. Let's take a closer look at these very important vocab words and see what they mean. First, let's talk about the word socialism. This was a belief that society, not individuals, should own property and resources. Marxism, this was a set of principles that was developed by Karl Marx, who believed that workers would overthrow the government and establish a classless society. And finally, communism. This was a form of socialism that was influenced by Marxism. And under communism, the government distributes all of the property and all of the resources. You remember earlier when we were talking about the February Revolution, and I told you that it was one of two revolutions that happened that year. Well, now we're going to talk about the other one. This is the October Revolution, and this is when the Bolsheviks, who were being led by Lenin, took control of the government a few months later. The Bolsheviks were supported by those people who wanted food, land, and an end to the war. And the Bolsheviks won the majority in the St. Petersburg Soviet. When I say Soviet, I mean their local council. Both the Soviet and the Bolsheviks had people who were willing to fight for them. But the important thing to remember here is that they did not have to fight to win power. They were voted in. Now, what were the Bolsheviks able to actually make good on? Well, they did bring about an end to the war. In 1918, the Bolsheviks ended Russia's involvement in World War I. They did this by signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, and they were forced to give up valuable territory. How much territory am I talking about? Take a look at your map over here for a moment. All this land that I've just highlighted for you was what they were forced to give up. And unfortunately, this made a lot of people very unhappy. Why? Because this part of the land actually had a lot of coal and a lot of their population. Suddenly, people were losing family members. So why did the Bolsheviks agree to give up this huge piece of land? Well, it was because they believed that if the Allies were put into power and if they didn't give the Allies what they wanted, they would come in, the Allies would, and find the Tsar and put him back into power. So the Bolsheviks didn't want that to happen. They wanted to remain in power. So they agreed to give up all this land. So that was the cause. What was the effect? Well, the effect was that you had unhappy Russians who were ready to revolt against the Bolsheviks. Now, what did that revolt look like? Well, it actually looked like a civil war. And the conflict resulted in a 3-year civil war. And the Bolsheviks, they created an army, and they called their army the Red Army. And the opponents, or the anti-communists, they formed the White Army. Now, remember here that the United States and the Western European nations, they provided aid to the White Army. Now, the problem here was that the Red Army had a lot of soldiers, but they didn't have a lot of leaders. Now, the White Army, they had a lot of leaders, a lot of tactical officers, but they didn't have a lot of soldiers. So what happens when you don't bring enough soldiers to a civil war? Well, the Bolsheviks win. The Bolsheviks were victorious. However, the consequences or the effects of this were that industry and farmland were destroyed, and up to 15 million people were killed in the fighting and in the famine that followed. Now, during all of this, you might be asking yourself, whatever happened to the Tsar's family? Well, after the war broke out, the Red Army, the Bolshevik army, arrested Tsar Nicholas and his family. Let's take a look at this photo for a moment. It's very different than the one that we saw earlier, where they were dressed in very fine clothes and wearing their crowns and sitting in an opulent room. Now, they look a lot like peasant farmers. The Red Army ensured that the Tsar could not be restored to power, and they placed the family under house arrest and they moved them to Siberia. Now finally, they executed the family in 1918 and buried their bodies in a secret location. Now for years it was rumored that the Princess Anastasia actually escaped this execution. However, in the late 1990s, the bones of the family were found, and due to DNA testing, we actually learned that Princess Anastasia was killed that same time. Back to our lesson question. How did the Russian Revolution change the role of government? Well, again, we're talking about cause and effect. We looked at our causes. We looked at life in Russia before the revolution and how that led to the effect of a Russian Revolution and a civil war. Now we're going to look about how the effect of that resulted in communist rule. So let's take a look at communists in power. Well, after taking power, the Bolsheviks, or the Reds, they made a lot of changes. The Bolsheviks changed their name. They became the Communist Party. Russia became the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the USSR, or also called the Soviet Union. Now, if you say USSR or Soviet Union, both are right. You could use them interchangeably. Now, St. Petersburg, the capital, was changed to Leningrad. Leningrad means Lenin City, named after Vladimir Lenin. Let's take a look at their flag that they also changed for a moment. You can see that the flag is now all red to support that Red Army. You can also see the hammer and sickle. The hammer was there to represent the working class, and the sickle was there to represent the farmers. But the communists did more than just change their name and change the country's name, change the capital's name, and change the flag. They also changed the government itself. The communists changed the government of Russia. They created a single-party state. What do I mean by single-party state? Well, they were ruled by the Communist Party, and that was the only game in town. There were no Republicans. There were no Democrats. There were no independents. You were communist or you were nothing. They prohibited all other political parties, and they used a secret police called the Cheka to actually spy on citizens. And the Cheka could have been anyone. It could have been a family member. And if you were caught saying bad things about the Communist Party, you'd be in a lot of trouble. So let's take a look at how this change in government looked compared to other forms of government. Now, the communists in the USSR created a new type of government. They created a single-party state, which was a government-controlled economy, and there were very few personal freedoms. Now, what they used to have under the Tsar was a monarchy, and this was a form of government with an absolute leader, Tsar. And they also, that Tsar would inherit titles and powers. Now let's compare that to what we have in the United States. In the United States, we have a democracy, and a democracy is an elected form of government in which the people have the power, and we experience many freedoms and many liberties. So the communists weren't just renaming cities and changing the flags around. They also took control of the Soviet economy, making all the decisions about what and how much was produced. They controlled everything. They ended most private ownership of business. You couldn't own your own shop anymore. They set the wages and the prices. And when I say they, remember, I mean the communists. They decided how much things were going to cost, and they decided how much money you were going to make. They also took food and grain from the peasants to feed the cities. They took land from the wealthy. There was no more private ownership of land. The communists owned it all. And also, they would assign jobs and homes to the workers. They decided what you would do and where you were going to live from now. You didn't have any options. The big takeaway, the big thing to remember here is that the communists controlled everything. Now, how was that working for them? Well, turns out that it didn't. And so to help the economy, Lenin established a new economic policy, or the NEP, right here. And what that did was it reversed many of the communist changes. It allowed for some private ownership of land and some private ownership of small businesses, and it allowed some peasants to own their own land and to sell their surplus crops. However, they decided that that also wasn't working out too well for them, and so these changes were temporary, and they would be reversed again later in the 1930s. Let's take a look at the growth of autocratic government. And when I say autocratic government, I mean powerful, controlling governments. Now, this timeline just shows what's been going on in Russia. We started with the Russian Revolution occurring in 1917. Now, a few years later, we have the establishment of the USSR, which was an autocratic government. Now, let's take a look at the rest of the world. At this same time that the USSR was being established, another autocratic government was being formed in Italy. Mussolini seized control of Italy. Also, a few years later, over in Germany, Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany, forming an autocratic government. Now, what happens? Well, this all culminates into the beginning of World War II here in 1939.